All right. So I'm a real person, and as for my height, I'm 6'3". Trust me. This is actually going to be the best No Identity 2008 keynote that you've ever heard. Trust me. All of you who are selling products here today, you're going to have so many new clients by the end of this conference. Trust me. Those of you with kids that are home while you're here, they're all behaving like little angels. They're doing their homework. Everything's great at home. Trust me. Any of you believe anything I just said besides my height? Probably not. I don't know your kids, but I certainly hope you didn't believe me. And that's because as soon as someone asserts their honesty, like I did by saying, trust me, it's human nature to immediately start looking for proof to back that up. My name is Nick Shapiro. I'm the Global Head of Trust and Risk Management at Airbnb. And I'm here to talk about why that is. Trust isn't something that you can tell people to do. It's not something you get just because you ask for it. And you can't buy it, even in a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign. So before I was Global Head of Trust and Risk at Airbnb, I was the Deputy Chief of Staff for the CIA. I was a senior counterterrorism, Homeland Security aide to President Obama in the White House. And I realized when I left government, I had no idea what I was going to do. I left about 3 years ago, and by the looks of it, I'm really glad I did. But I didn't know what was going to happen. I up and moved to San Francisco. I'd been to Yemen more times than I'd been to San Francisco. And when I got there, I realized I was a little different than everybody else. From all my meetings, from every corner of Silicon Valley, I discovered everyone was so optimistic. Brilliant, but I mean really optimistic. And I realized, I think I brought the healthy counterbalance of the extreme optimism of Silicon Valley with me. As Philip and Anish and many folks at Airbnb here today will attest to, I'm the guy no one likes to invite to a meeting. Right? I'm the buzzkill. I'm the guy who says, no, we can't do that. Are you crazy? Right? But right now, before we get into it, we're going to see how optimistic all of you guys are. So I want everyone to take out their phones. Okay? I want you to unlock your phone and just hand it to the perfect stranger behind you. You're looking at me like I'm crazy, but I'm dead serious. I'm just going to stand here, or I'm going to bring him back up to talk about online dating. So seriously, hand your phone over. It won't be that long, I promise. Unlock it and hand it over. So now, that tiny, maybe large sense of panic you're feeling, right? The longer I talk, the longer someone else is holding your unlocked phone. That's how Airbnb hosts feel the first time they open up their homes. Okay, give back your phone before someone has a heart attack. All right? That's how Airbnb hosts feel the first time they open up their home to a stranger. Except they're not worried about someone seeing their messages or his online dating profile. They're worried about someone seeing their bedroom, their kitchen, their bathroom, their toilet, right? Let's do a little thought experiment. What if before I very forcefully made you hand over your phone to a complete stranger, what if that person introduced themselves to you first? What if you knew some things about them? Their name, their job, their hobbies, maybe the name of their dog? What if they had 150 positive reviews saying they're great at holding other people as unlocked phones? Right? You would have felt differently. You wouldn't have felt like you were going to have a stroke or a heart attack when you handed your phone to them because they wouldn't have felt like a stranger. That's Airbnb. That's what we're actually doing every single day. That's our product. At Airbnb, you can rent a room, when you travel. You can book a restaurant reservation. You can go on an exciting adventure. Sure. But our product is trust. Right? That's what we're working to facilitate every single day. And we're doing it at, I think, one of the most incredible times in society in terms of trust, and that's because it seems like there isn't any. If you go on Twitter, it's like the whole world is falling apart or on fire every single minute of every single day. Right? Some people say that we're in a crisis of trust right now. Other people think that we're trusting differently. Regardless of which of those two schools of trust thinking you were part of, everyone agrees that trust in our main institutions, business, media, government, hell, even nonprofits, trust in those institutions that have governed modern day life is plummeting. But at the same time, trust is a fundamental currency of the sharing economy. It's at the very heart of Airbnb. In business for us, it's booming. We've had 300 million guest arrivals to date. At Airbnb, we've got 4.5 million listings in 191 countries. That's more than the top 5 hotel chains combined. Tonight, there'll be 2 million strangers staying in someone else's home on Airbnb. So how the hell is that happening? Right? If no one is trusting anything, and the world is certainly on fire, why is the sharing economy thriving when it's built on trust? Well, technology has a big part of that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But before I get into that, I think it's important to take a step back and figure out, how did we get here? Why is trust plummeting in these main institutions that have run modern life while we're seeing it thriving in the sharing economy? I think it has to do with 3 trends that have been building one on top of the other for the last 2 decades. First, there's some significant events that have taken place. Second are some of the downsides of the unfolding effects of globalization. And third is the advent and rise of social media. So it seems like, in the last 2 hours, there's been 2 decades of news, probably. But in the last 2 decades, there's been 3 significant events that I want to call attention to. Starting with the September 11th terrorist attack, then the faulty rationale for the war in Iraq, then the 2008 global financial collapse. Those 3 events left people feeling afraid, angry, bitter, suspicious. Not exactly the recipe you're looking for when you're trying to make some trust. On top of that, throw globalization into that mix. Now, globalization has undoubtedly advanced the human condition to lengths many thought unimaginable. The world is more interconnected, it's smaller than ever before, and it's great. But there have been some downsides. Too many people, too many workers, too many families feel as if they're bearing the brunt of globalization without reaping any of the benefits. More automation, more job loss. The mass movement of people and the mixing of cultures leaves some afraid, feeling afraid for their economic security, their financial security. Those fears have brought about a resurgence in nativism and xenophobia. These were once, things of fringe movements, right? But thanks to, number 3, the advent and rise of social media, this nativism and xenophobia has become mainstream in many places. We're starting to uncover the effects of the fact that unfiltered information flows so quickly all over the world. The mainstream media is no longer the arbiter of what is or isn't a fact. Alternative facts. Right? You could go online and find what looks like a credible news story filled with what you think are facts for something that is complete bullshit. Fake news. But not just something Trump doesn't agree with, actual fake news. So now, when you think about those three trends I talked about and how they built on top of each other, I think it starts to make sense why people aren't trusting business, media, government, or even nonprofits, because they've all been a part of this. But they are starting to trust each other. And that's the sharing economy. You're more likely to trust the random person who picks you up in a car to get you there safely. You're willing to trust someone who opens up their home. But that doesn't magically take place. It's not like, well, I hate the government, so now I'm going to trust the random person. Right? It takes work. You have to facilitate that trust. You have to earn that trust. You have to build that trust. And again, technology plays a huge role in that. So at Airbnb, we designed a system that I like to call our version of the hierarchy of needs approach. That's how we build trust at Airbnb. First is safety. People need to know they're going to be safe, or there is no trust. Second is transparency. People need to know how to use it, how it works. And third is support. They need to know there's an off-ramp or an ambulance, something that's going to come help if something goes wrong. So everything we do at Airbnb is filtered through those three buckets, because that's the hierarchy of needs for how you're going to trust Airbnb and how you're going to trust each other. So we'll break it down a little bit. Safety, the first bucket, fundamental. Every reservation on Airbnb is scored ahead of time for risk. Much smarter people than me, many of which on our team in the audience here. We use machine learning, predictive analytics, behavioral analysis, instantly evaluating hundreds of different signals on each and every reservation, deciding, is this a reservation we should let through? Is there anything that needs to be flagged ahead of time? Can we stop a bad reservation before an incident takes place? Hotels don't do that. Global watch lists and background checks. Every host and guest on Airbnb all over the world gets checked against terrorist watch lists, against financial screenings lists. No background check system is infallible, of course. But also in the US, every host and guest receives a background check. We're looking for prior violent felony convictions, sex offender registration, significant misdemeanors. If any of those things come up, you can't use Airbnb. Hotels don't do that. Scam prevention. Airbnb is an internet platform. The internet and scams are basically synonyms, right? They're in bed together, and they always will be, in my opinion. But on Airbnb, the way we've put it together, we've made it really easy to book safely. There's only one thing people have to know. One thing. Stay on the platform. As long as you stay on Airbnb's platform, you don't leave, you don't have your communication off the platform, you don't pay off the platform, you're going to be protected. And that's because we don't pay our hosts until 24 hours after a guest checks in. So you've taken away the motivation of a scammer. They could put a fake listing on Airbnb, but if you pay for it on the platform, you show up and you're like, crap, there's no home. That person doesn't get their money, right? So there's no point to do the scam. Next is home safety. Now, first thing I always tell folks is that our hosts, when they're not renting out their homes, sleep there safely every night themselves. They have to follow all local laws and regulations. We regularly run home safety workshops where we partner with fire and EMS services to give our hosts the best advice to how to keep themselves, their guests, and their homes safe. We give out free smoke and carbon dioxide detectors to every single host who wants one all over the world. Hosts have an online safety app, in our app, an online safety page where they can include important local contact information, the location of fire extinguishers and smoke alarms and those exit routes. So guests have them right in the palm of their hands when they check into their Airbnb. We send out emergency information to hosts and guests in the region if there's a terrorist attack or a natural disaster, giving them important information they need to know in an emergency. We're doing all these things, and we're using our app, and we're using technology to do them. Second is transparency. Again, people need to know how to use it, and they want to know who each other are. There's no trust if there's not. Think about the phone experiment we did. So we have a detailed profile page for every host and guest, so you can learn more about each other before you accept a request or reservation. There's the messaging system. You can safely communicate back and forth in the app on Airbnb and grill each other, interview each other, ask why you're in town, ask if there are steep staircases. Is the neighborhood safe to walk alone in at night? Have that conversation with people using our technology. And third, and probably most importantly, are the reviews. Every host and guest on Airbnb reviews each other. And that helps give people the notion of not only does it keep you on good behavior, but a host and guest can see what the previous behavior was and then use that to make a decision. The wonderful person who spoke before me talked about how it's more than a passport, right? Your identity. You can actually see on Airbnb how you've behaved in other people's homes or how hosts in other homes have felt. It's as if before you checked into a hotel room, you could see what every other person who ever stayed in that exact room thought of it, as well as the people who work at the front desk. You have that knowledge when you're using Airbnb. We give you that information through our technology. And then last is support. People think, often I hear that people aren't sure exactly what Airbnb itself is. They know the concept. Oh, you can rent a room from a perfect stranger. I saw a focus group recently where a person said, I don't know what Airbnb is. I think it's this thing in the cloud, right? Well, that person would be wrong, of course. Airbnb is a global company that backs up all of this. We've got thousands of customer service agents and trust and safety agents available 24/7, 365, in 11 different languages, there to help if something goes wrong. And the team is incredible, right? There's a lot of trust and safety people on Airbnb in the audience here today. They're not ex-Intel or law enforcement folks like myself. We've got product managers and engineers, data scientists and designers, victim advocacy specialists, crisis managers, fraud experts, cyber experts, insurance experts. You name it, we have it at our disposal at Airbnb. It's incredible because everyone's thinking about the technology solely and how we can use that to build trust. Then throw in, we've got a $1 million guarantee to reimburse for damages. We've got a $1 million host protection insurance. These trust and safety and customer service agents can do refunds and rebooking assistance. We're there to help when something goes wrong. Because, and I think this is really important, we can't allow a second breach of trust. And what I mean by that is you can't mitigate the risk in travel, right? You can't prevent every bad thing from happening. There's risk staying in a hotel, getting on a plane, crossing a street. There's risk staying in an Airbnb. We can't prevent everything from happening, even with the best technology there is. And I think people do understand that. So when something does go wrong, within reason, they're upset, they're angry, but how we respond, how all of you respond in your companies when something goes wrong, that is under your control every single time. And if you don't do it well, then they suffer a second breach of trust. In my opinion, that is worse than the first breach of trust. They've been let down. That's when they call the media. That's when they call their congressman or woman. That's when action needs to be taken, right? So if I can leave you with anything about that, it's think about the second breach of trust even more than the first one. So given what's going on in the world today and the massive upheaval it seems like every day, I'm often reminded of moments that I got to spend in the White House Situation Room, dealing with a terrorist attack, a natural disaster. And what comes to memory is, without fail, there would always be someone standing there yelling, we gotta tell people not to panic. We gotta tell them, don't panic, go, let's put it out there. Tell them not to panic, we got this. You know the best way to make someone panic? Tell them not to, right? Trust works the exact same way. You can't just tell people to trust. No matter how powerful you think you are, you can't will it into existence. You don't get it because you ask people to do it. And although our marketing department would probably hate me for saying this, as I said, you can't buy it even in a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign. It doesn't work that way. You have to give people information. I walked you through all the things we do at Airbnb to use technology to help build and facilitate that trust. Everyone needs to do more of that. We need to do more of that because that's the only way you're going to actually build trust, is by giving people actionable information, telling them what you do, what you don't do, so they make up their own minds, and then they will start trusting. We got 15 more minutes before I get thrown off stage, so I'm happy to hang around and answer any questions. I am an expert after all. Trust me.
Thanks very much, Nick. Okay, so Nick has very kindly agreed to stay and answer a few questions. We have microphone. Oh, I should say about everything except his many visits to Yemen when he was with the CIA and the unfortunate but entirely coincidental outbreak of a large-scale civil war there. So if we could just, everything except that would be great.
Do me a favor. I've been told if you guys don't ask questions, he's going to. So please.
So let's start over this side, please.
Hey, Nick. Nick, Rob Kotlart's at Signicat, Nick. It's great to hear all of these key things. I recently went to make another booking on Airbnb. I'm a very loyal customer. And I had a gruesome experience, my friend, having to scan my passport. It was beyond unpleasant. I had more friction than I've ever had in the relationship with your organization. I almost pulled my hair out. You've known me for a long time. Why did I have to scan a passport and go through such a gruesome experience?
That was it? That was the real Airbnb? Or just some website that...
David, don't go there.
You make people scan passports? I didn't know this.
Again, I'm the buzzkill guy. I said that in the beginning of this. You have me to blame personally for that experience. 100%. And I stand behind that. Yes, identity is not just a passport, but it is also part of identity. This might be the most unpopular thing said in this entire conference, and I'm the most unpopular person in the room at Airbnb, and my colleagues are laughing, joking, because they've heard me say this 1,000 times. But yes, knowing who you are, that you are who you say you are, does have to do with your physical identity still. We're not there yet. There are lots of things that we're working on. Mapping your phone number to your phone bill and the social network stuff. And we're seeing today, just last week, some of the problems with social media and social networks having all this information, the harvesting of all that data, right? So yes, your passport might need to get scanned. We use machine learning and risk scoring, and maybe there was something different about that reservation that you tried. Maybe it was a host who said, I'm only going to allow guests who scan an ID, because we give hosts that option. Because that's also part of building trust. We can't say to hosts all over the world, 4.5 million of them, and say, hey, not all of these people are going to want to show you their ID, but trust us. They are who they say they are, right? That doesn't work. Hosts need to feel like they have a tool at their disposal and we're working. So it was gruesome. It sounds horrible. I'll tell you, when you started your question, I was expecting a way different example. I'm not going to lie or belittle your experience. We have a lot of work to do to make that more seamless, without a doubt. And we've got some really talented folks in the audience who are actually working on that 24/7. And they would like nothing more than to be able to prevent you from having to go through that experience. I never even heard of the word friction before I showed up in Silicon Valley with that respect, right? It is the most evil word in our company, I think. And I'm the most evil person because I want more of it, right? Sometimes I think more friction is better. And it also is an incentive against bad behavior. You scan your passport, you know we have your passport. You go do something wrong, you're damn right we know who you are, unless it's a fake passport, of course.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you know that it was his passport? I mean, I'll vouch for him personally.
Yeah.
But how did you know it was his passport?
Because we didn't just scan the passport and say, okay, all good, right? Again, we've got a lot of smart people. I'm looking at some in the audience right now that are doing a lot of other things behind the scenes. We are mapping phone numbers to phone bills. We are seeing whether your social media page, is connected or not. Do you have mutual friends? All these other things are happening. But again, right now still, hosts want that comfort. They want to know that you scan an ID, so we give them that option.
Okay, let's come down the front for the next question here. So we're over here now.
Hi, Tom O'Malley, Frozen Pie. So I've used your service, and I'm one of those people who thought this is a crazy idea, right? And I always had fears of Kathy Bates and misery. And I didn't have a problem with, proving who I was to the host. But if I were to rate the host, right?
If you were to what, sorry?
If I were to rate the host, like I had a
Yeah.
great stay, you make public what I want to make private only to the host. Has that been fixed? Because I don't rate them for that reason. I say, look, great experience, but in the nature of my work, I'm not putting my picture out there for all your other users and all the other hosts and guests to see.
Yeah, it has been fixed, and I don't think we do a good enough job of communicating probably how to do it. But you have two options after you stay in an Airbnb. There's public feedback, where you give a public review that other hosts and other guests can see, and then there's private, where you can just tell the host directly that no one else sees how you thought the experience went.
But is the public version going to put my picture out to everybody on your
If you
platform?
leave a public review, yes, your account and your picture are on there, but you can leave a private review.
And who sees the private review?
Just the host.
That host. Well, but that host
Yes.
wants other guests to see it. That's what I'm saying. I'd like to be able to help the host by saying this is a great experience without exposing my identity to those other people.
This relates to a conversation that was going on yesterday about verified but anonymous credentials. In other words, and I'm sure this will happen in due course, I go stay at Airbnb. You give me some kind of cryptographic token which proves unequivocally that I did stay at that Airbnb, but contains no personally identifiable information. I then give that token to whatever, you, TripAdvisor, anybody else, so that you can be sure that the review is correct, and it was, but there's no way you can cryptographically go back and murder him for giving you a bad review. That happens, right? That's what you're worried
So
about.
we're
I'm worried about the broken ankle.
Yeah. So
We're
I think-
certainly not there, but I'm glad you brought that up. Just one thing on the reviews, that the fact that they're legitimate is a big deal, right? I mean,
Yeah,
the
it is.
online travel agencies are littered with fake hotel reviews. You actually can't leave a review, as I'm assuming a lot of you know, if you're on Airbnb, unless you've actually transacted with that person. But no, as of right now, if you leave a public review, we don't hide who you are, because again, other hosts, we want to see the reviews that you've left, and other guests want to see what the host felt. And right now, that's part of the system of good behavior and keeping people honest.
let's take the next. We'll come to you next, I promise. Just take the second question since you've got the microphone.
My question is about, I don't know if it's a question or an observation, but about trust and identity. Are you more interested in the trust and reputation of a person staying, or who they are?
Yeah.
Because I don't see that trust and identity need to be bound. You need to know the antecedent behavior of a person staying in one of the properties as a predictor of the behavior you're likely to get. A person who is using a claimed identity, a synthetic or an impersonator, could be exceedingly well behaved. Somebody who is living on the gray market as an undocumented alien, but nevertheless living perfectly happy and honestly in the economy. So we're having a day talking about trust at an identity conference, and reputation, behavior, antecedent behavior, and as a predictor of future behavior is slightly different, but not separated from
Yeah.
identity.
You are absolutely right.
Point, right?
You're absolutely right. And we have this debate constantly at Airbnb. And in my opinion, both are important. Because if someone is lying about who they are, in my opinion, that is a predictor of future behavior. You called out one specific example of why that might not be the case. But I could call out 10 others why it is the case. We prevent sex offenders from joining Airbnb, people with violent criminal past, right? If you have that in your history, maybe you will never do something again. But that is a policy decision we've made in Airbnb, and it makes hosts feel better about opening up their homes to a stranger, and make guests feel better about staying with a stranger. So if you might never do that crime again, and you might be well behaved in every Uber you've ever taken, if you lie to us about who you are, what does that say about your reputation, right? Maybe you are planning on doing that again. What if the host finds out you aren't who you say you are, and they Google you, and then they see you are on one of these lists? How is that experience with Airbnb going to work for them?
Yeah, but what if you're undercover for the CIA and you're booking a hotel room, and then Airbnb say, oh, he's not John Doe, he's actually Nick from the CIA? That's not a good outcome.
Well, as I can tell you, I'm sure that my previous colleagues would love to use our service anonymously, but we don't want them to.
That's very unpatriotic, Nick.
Very unpatriotic.
Okay. We have a question down this end, please.
Yeah, hi, Nick. I just wanted to come back to the question about the person who had this horrible experience to download the passport. Because actually, I saw the opposite. I saw an Airbnb agent, basically a concierge service on top of it, and they say, we really like when actually somebody comes as a customer of Airbnb because we know there's 5 attributes that Airbnb gets, and that's very valuable. But it's only valuable if that's going to be portable, and that's then truly valuable to the people because I can use my Airbnb identity, to go at one fine stay or somewhere else.
That's a very interesting question.
And so I wanted to know when GDPR is coming, with data portability, how easy are you going to make it for a subject access request and for people to take their Airbnb identity, and what type of data you're going to allow to port, to one fine stay?
Yeah.
Okay, can I ask you to break the answer to that into 2 parts? Because it's a very interesting point. So there's 2 points, I think, wrapped up in that. So one is there's this general issue about personally identifiable information and data portability, and under various new communist prescriptions in Europe, people are going to be able to ask you for their data and move it around. So question one is, are you prepared for that, and how are you going to do that? But I think implicit in that, there's a second question, which is, could you envisage a situation, which actually I am not negative about at all, where I could see your Airbnb reputation, but for other purposes? Like, if I'm going to allow you to marry my daughter, for example, or something like that, your Airbnb reputation, is this a nice person? Does he pick up? That kind of thing. Those actually have a value outside the Airbnb context, don't they? I mean, so can you ask both of those questions, please?
Yes. They absolutely do. We are not in a position where we're going to be, right now, today, you log in on Airbnb, you can then log into all these other things. I mean, look at what just happened with Facebook, right? There are some serious questions that need to get asked and answered about data privacy and security through all of these different platforms and the sharing of information. So, in the future, could it happen? Possibly, but it has to be done smartly and safely, and the rate we're going, it's going to be done with the government, right? Making sure that companies are taking the necessary precautions to allow all this information sharing. There is value in, seeing, well, you were a good Airbnb host or guest, maybe you could marry your daughter, right? Maybe you'd be better off on a better passenger in Uber. There's certainly value in that. But at the same time, what we're trying to do at Airbnb, of course we want to make the world better and we want to make it easier for you to do all these things. But what we're focused on is making sure that someone who shouldn't be on Airbnb because of some derogatory reason isn't on Airbnb. Does that mean if you got picked up by an Uber driver and you were late and you were having a bad day and you slammed his car door and you're a jerk, does that mean that you're a horrible person and you should never be allowed to stay in Airbnb? I don't think so. That sounds worse to me than scanning my passport, right? So we have to think about these things, you have to think about them holistically and look at the big picture. Of course it would be easy to say, it would be so great, why can't I just do that? But there are, again, I'm the buzzkill guy. There are real problems just jumping into that. So it's something we're looking at, it's something we're talking about. Of course, it's been many discussions, but a lot of work has to get done before we get there.
And just the first part of that question about the data portability for GDPR, that's something that's in your plans, is it?
It is not something that I'm focused on right now. I think I'd talk to my colleagues afterwards about it.
Okay, but I will be able to export my data and, okay, good. And he's Belgian, so he speaks with authority on EU matters. Let's come down the back for the last question, please.
Yeah, hi, Roger Hahn from Capital One. So of course, very closely linked between trust is also risk. And we know that humans are very notoriously bad at assessing risk. So, why is it, for example, that when I drive up to Marriott, I'm just perfectly happy to hand my keys to that guy that seems to be wearing a uniform, right, my $30,000 car, right, versus a friend of mine that I've known for, 10, 20 years, and he asks to borrow my car for a day. Which one am I going to kind of question more? I don't even blink an eyelash when I, hand my keys. But humans are just really notoriously bad. So do you have any suggestions or recommendations of, should we try to address that risk and kind of communicate right up front to users in this context? Hey, based on our experience, like you have this little fraction chance of risk, of this happening. These are the percentage of our, customers that have had bad experience, have been robbed when they've been, or do you kind of sweep that under the carpet? Is there value of surfacing that so that people can really make a more accurate assessment of the risk that they're being exposed to?
Can I just make one tiny observation about that? So there's a theory called expectation of redress, which says, and I think the statistical evidence is very clear. So if you have had a bad, just to go to your point about the support at the beginning, if you've had a bad experience and it's been dealt with, you're statistically far more likely to go and buy from that person again, even compared to somebody that never had a problem. So in other words, having a problem that's fixed and dealt with is a disproportionate influencer in choosing again. It's this thing like if you buy something from a store, you buy a jacket and it has a hole in it, you take it back and they just replace it there and then, and you're more likely to buy from that store than if you had no problem.
Yeah,
I think that your point about support was well taken.
Yeah.
But this issue about brand, I think, factors into this in some way, doesn't it? So Airbnb, it builds a different kind of trust than the kind of trust that you have in a brand like Marriott. Is that kind of...
Well, I think what you're saying is that it was more of a question about risk communication in my mind. Do you want people to know that incidents happen, give them the facts about how often, and so they can make an informed decision?
He's not trusting the guy, he's trusting the brand, right? When you drive up to the Marriott, you're not trusting the guy you're giving the keys to, you're trusting the brand.
The fact that, just coincidentally, he happened to be wearing a Marriott shirt, right? It's easy, somebody could easily fabricate, and create that shirt and appear to be an employee of Marriott. I'm just, and again, I'm not downgrading Marriott.
The CIA do
that as an
that
example.
all the time, I'm telling you.
Risk communication plays a huge part in trust. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. Again, that's what I was trying to get across in my remarks. You have to give people all of the information. In 2017, there were 49 million reservations on Airbnb. 0.009% of those ended with some type of significant property damage. That's anything over $1,000. That means you could host a new reservation on Airbnb every single night for 63 years before you expect to file a claim. In my opinion, that's really helpful information for people to know. Even if that stat was higher, I would advocate we have to tell people what that incident rate is. Because again, from what I was saying earlier, absolutely, yeah, it's on our website. I'll even give you the injury rate. So 49 million reservations.
Whoa, there's an injury rate?
49 million reservations last year. Host protection insurance is if someone gets hurt, they file a host protection insurance claim. 0.001%. It's incredibly small, but it does happen, and people need to know about that. But again, even if those numbers were not as good, I mean, we've put them out now, so we have to commit to putting them out. So if those numbers change, we're still going to put them out, because in my opinion, that's how you earn trust. You can't sweep these things under the rug. You can't hide them. You have to give people the information so they know, and then they decide for themselves. It's the same thing as don't panic, right? Tell folks what's going on, and then they make an informed decision. As for the brand and the person, what you were saying, I think that speaks very loudly to this whole point as well. People are more willing to trust each other now than they are big businesses. And Airbnb is a very interesting model there, because it's certainly not a big business in the sense of Marriott. When you're using Airbnb, who are you trusting? Are you trusting Airbnb, a brand, or are you trusting other people? I think the answer is both. And we have to work to facilitate both. When you're using the Marriott, you're pretty much trusting just the brand of Marriott.
Listen, we've got to draw a line under it there because we have to move on. But Nick, I want to thank you very much. We really appreciate speakers who come and give honest answers to questions they weren't expecting. That's really important to us. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.